The first mistake took less than 10 seconds, but its consequences would reach far beyond the front doors no one expected to matter. Just after 8:15 on a gray Tuesday morning, a black woman stepped onto the polished concrete walkway leading to the Public Safety Administration building, carrying nothing more than a leather portfolio and a sealed envelope marked for hand delivery. She wore a navy business suit, sensible shoes, and the calm expression of someone who had rehearsed patience long before she arrived. Employees streamed through the glass entrance with coffee cups, security badges, and hurried conversations about meetings that would begin in less than half an hour. She paused just outside the security line, checking the building directory mounted beside the revolving door before taking one quiet step forward. "Ma'am, stop right there," a firm voice called out before she reached the entrance. Officer Daniel Mercer, a veteran patrol officer temporarily assigned to building security, moved between her and the door with practiced confidence. 15 years on the job had taught him that hesitation could become risk, and he prided himself on acting before problems grew larger. "This entrance isn't open to the public without clearance," he said evenly. The woman nodded politely. "I understand. I have a scheduled delivery that requires a signature." "Who's expecting you?" Mercer asked. "I'd prefer to provide that information to the receiving office." His expression hardened. To him, reluctance sounded like avoidance. Behind them, two employees slowed their pace. A delivery driver stopped loading a hand truck. The ordinary rhythm of the morning shifted almost without anyone realizing it. "Identification," Mercer requested. She reached carefully toward her handbag. "I'll retrieve it slowly." "Leave the bag where it is." She immediately stopped moving. "Of course." There was no frustration in her voice, no argument, no attempt to force her way inside. She simply waited. Mercer interpreted her composure differently. Experience had taught him that confidence sometimes concealed deception, and every second she remained silent reinforced the conclusion already forming. In his mind, "What's inside the portfolio?" he asked. "Business documents." "Open it." She glanced briefly at the sealed envelope. The contents are intended to remain sealed until they're delivered. Several more people gathered near the entrance, pretending to check their phones while quietly watching. A young security officer near the metal detectors shifted uneasily but said nothing. Mercer stepped closer. "Ma'am, if you're refusing lawful instructions, you're creating a bigger problem than necessary." She met his eyes without raising her voice. "Officer, I'm fully willing to cooperate within your procedures." "Then open the portfolio." "I can't break the delivery protocol." That answer settled it for him. He radioed dispatch, requesting assistance with what he described as a non-compliant individual attempting to access a restricted government facility. The dispatcher acknowledged the call. Somewhere inside the building, a desk phone began ringing. Outside, the morning traffic rolled past without noticing that something important had just begun. Mercer instructed her to place her hands where he could see them while another officer approached from the parking lot. She complied immediately, her portfolio resting quietly at her feet. As the second officer arrived, the younger security employee looked again at the sealed envelope, his face losing color as he recognized a symbol printed beside the official seal, and before he could say a single word, the building's main elevator doors opened upstairs. The young security officer swallowed hard as he stared at the insignia printed beside the official seal on the envelope. He had seen that symbol only once during his orientation, buried inside a training presentation that emphasized chain of custody and restricted deliveries. Before he could speak, another employee stepped beside him and quietly asked, "Everything all right?" He hesitated. "I am not sure." Outside, Officer Daniel Mercer remained convinced he had already assessed the situation correctly. Years of responding to unpredictable encounters had conditioned him to trust his instincts, and every calm answer from the woman seemed in his mind like another carefully practiced response. "Dispatch has another unit on the way," his radio announced. Mercer nodded without taking his eyes off her. "Thank you." The woman remained exactly where he had instructed her to stand. Her hands stayed visible. Her breathing remained steady. She did not glance toward the growing crowd or attempt to persuade anyone watching that she had been treated unfairly. Instead, she watched the entrance itself, almost as though timing mattered more than anything happening around her. A maintenance supervisor pushing a rolling cart slowed as he approached the doorway. He recognized neither the woman nor Mercer, but he recognized tension when he saw it. Rather than interrupt, he quietly steered his cart around the gathering crowd and disappeared into another hallway. The moment passed, but the uneasy silence remained. Inside the lobby, two reception clerks exchanged concerned looks. One reached for the internal directory, while the other watched the security cameras displayed across several monitors. Camera 4 showed the entrance from above. Camera 7 captured the sidewalk. Camera 9 showed Mercer standing directly between the woman and the revolving door. Nothing appeared chaotic. Nothing appeared dangerous. Yet everyone inside sensed that something unusually important was unfolding. Mercer spoke again. "Who instructed you to deliver those documents?" "The receiving office has that information," she answered calmly. "You keep saying that. Because it is still true." One bystander quietly muttered that she seemed cooperative. Another whispered that perhaps the officer should simply verify the appointment. Mercer heard neither comment. His attention remained fixed on procedure as he understood it. The younger security officer stepped forward half a pace before stopping himself. "Officer Mercer." Mercer raised one hand slightly without looking back. "I have it under control." The younger officer fell silent, but his eyes remained locked on the sealed envelope. Something about it continued to trouble him. Upstairs, the ringing desk phone finally stopped. Moments later, a different telephone began ringing in another office. A receptionist answered, listened for several seconds, then immediately stood from her chair with an expression that caused nearby employees to stop typing. She hurried toward a secured hallway without saying a word. Outside, another patrol vehicle rolled quietly into the visitor parking area. The second officer stepped out, adjusted his uniform, and approached with measured confidence, expecting nothing more than a routine assist. As he reached Mercer, he looked briefly toward the woman, then down at the portfolio resting neatly beside her shoes. Before either officer could speak again, the front reception doors unlocked from inside, and someone with an executive access badge began walking directly toward the entrance. The executive access badge hanging from the approaching employee's jacket immediately caught the attention of everyone standing near the entrance. He moved with purpose but without panic, weaving through the lobby until the glass doors slid open. He looked first at Officer Daniel Mercer, then at the woman standing quietly with her hands still visible. "Good morning," he said evenly. "Is there a problem here?" Mercer answered before anyone else could speak. "Restricted access." She refused to identify the person she is meeting and would not open her portfolio. The employee nodded thoughtfully instead of reacting. "Ma'am, are you all right?" She gave a small, respectful nod. "Yes, thank you." "Have you been treated appropriately?" She paused for only a moment before answering. "The officer has made the decisions he believes are correct." Her response surprised several people listening nearby. She did not accuse anyone. She did not complain. She simply stated a fact, leaving the judgment for someone else. The employee studied her expression, then glanced toward the leather portfolio resting on the ground. "May I ask whether your delivery has a scheduled time?" "Yes." "Has that time passed?" She looked briefly toward the large clock mounted above the lobby reception desk. "Not yet." The answer caused the young security officer to tense. He quietly checked his own watch. There were still 4 minutes remaining. Mercer folded his arms. "Time does not change the situation." "Perhaps not," the woman replied calmly, "but it sometimes changes who arrives." The sentence lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. Several bystanders exchanged uncertain looks. The second patrol officer shifted his weight, beginning to wonder whether additional verification might save everyone unnecessary trouble. Mercer noticed the hesitation. "We are following procedure," he said confidently. "No one enters until identity and purpose are confirmed." "That is reasonable," the woman answered. "I have never suggested otherwise." The executive employee removed a small tablet from his briefcase and searched an internal schedule. His eyes narrowed slightly before he looked back toward the reception desk. "Can someone verify today's executive appointments?" he asked. The receptionist immediately began typing. Seconds passed. The silence became heavier than any argument could have been. A delivery truck pulled into the loading area. Employees continued entering through a side entrance after showing their identification, but nearly every one of them glanced toward the growing circle near the main doors. The maintenance supervisor returned from inside carrying a replacement light fixture. He stopped again, noticing that no one had moved. Even the morning breeze seemed to fade as everyone waited for the receptionist to finish searching the schedule. Suddenly her computer chimed. She looked at the screen, then quickly looked again as if she believed she had read something incorrectly. Without saying a word, she reached for the office telephone and pressed a speed dial button reserved for executive offices. The call was answered almost immediately. "This is reception," she said carefully. "I believe someone important is already waiting outside." She listened for several seconds, her expression changing from uncertainty to unmistakable concern. Then she slowly lowered the receiver and looked directly through the glass at the woman standing beside Officer Mercer before quietly saying, "Please tell them. They have less than 2 minutes." No one moved, yet every pair of eyes shifted toward the reception desk as though the building itself had begun. Holding its breath, Officer Daniel Mercer glanced at the digital clock above the lobby entrance. 1 minute and 48 seconds remained before whatever deadline the receptionist had mentioned would arrive. He kept his posture steady, refusing to let uncertainty replace experience. "Everyone relax," he said to the growing crowd. "We are simply verifying identity before granting access." The executive employee nodded politely but did not seem reassured. Instead, he looked back toward the receptionist, who was now speaking quietly into a headset while reviewing another screen that had only moments before required executive authorization. The woman remained exactly where she had been since Mercer first stopped her. The leather portfolio rested neatly beside her shoes, and the sealed envelope had not changed hands. She neither checked her watch nor asked how much longer this would take. Her patience itself had become unusual enough that several employees began whispering among themselves. "Most people would already be arguing," one clerk quietly observed. "She has not argued once," another replied. Mercer heard the comments but dismissed them. Cooperation, in his experience, did not automatically eliminate risk. Sometimes the calmest encounters required the greatest attention. He turned back toward the woman. "For the last time, who authorized your visit?" She answered with the same measured tone she had used since arriving. "The authorization is documented." "Where?" "Inside the building." Mercer frowned. "You expect me to accept that without verification?" "No, officer. I expect verification." Her answer lingered in the silence. She had not challenged his authority. She had simply redirected every question back toward the process itself. The second patrol officer studied her for several seconds before quietly asking Mercer, "Would you like me to contact records and see whether there is a scheduled delivery?" Mercer shook his head. "Reception is already checking." The younger security officer shifted nervously. "Sir, perhaps we should also." Mercer raised a hand gently, not to embarrass him but to maintain control. "One chain of communication. We avoid confusion that way." The explanation sounded reasonable, and no one objected. Yet the uncertainty continued growing. Inside the lobby, the receptionist suddenly stood again. This time she walked briskly toward a secure hallway, carrying a printed document she had just removed from the copier. She disappeared behind a controlled access door that required both a badge and a security code. The executive employee watched her leave before quietly saying, almost to himself, that hallway is only used for executive briefings. The maintenance supervisor, still waiting nearby with his rolling cart, looked toward the parking lot. "Is someone important coming?" No one answered. A faint engine could be heard somewhere beyond the front drive. It was not loud enough to attract attention by itself, but several heads instinctively turned toward the sound. The woman did not. Instead, she looked briefly at the American flag moving gently above the entrance before returning her attention to Officer Mercer. "Whatever happens next," she said calmly, "I hope the record is complete." Mercer immediately touched the body camera mounted on his uniform. "It is recording." She gave a respectful nod. "Thank you." At that exact moment, two dark government vehicles turned into the circular driveway together, and every conversation outside the building stopped. The two government vehicles rolled to a smooth stop beneath the entrance canopy, their engines falling silent almost together. No emergency lights flashed. No one rushed forward. The stillness surrounding their arrival somehow drew even more attention than noise would have. Every conversation outside the building faded as four professionally dressed officials stepped out, each carrying identification cases rather than briefcases. None of them looked alarmed. Instead, they scanned the entrance with quiet precision before exchanging brief nods with one another. Officer Daniel Mercer watched them approach, convinced they had been called simply because the situation involved a government facility. His confidence remained intact. In his mind, every decision he had made fit the facts available to him. He had stopped an unidentified visitor, carrying sealed documents into a restricted building. That was exactly what his assignment required. The woman remained motionless beside her portfolio. She did not wave at the newcomers. She did not attempt to gain their attention. She simply waited, allowing events to unfold without interruption. One of the arriving officials stopped several feet from Mercer and displayed a credential wallet just long enough for the executive employee to recognize it. The employee immediately straightened his posture and stepped aside. "Good morning, officer," the official said politely. "We understand there is a delayed delivery." Mercer answered with professional courtesy. "There is an unresolved identity verification." "Very well," the official replied. "May we observe?" The request caught Mercer slightly off guard. Most visitors wanted explanations. These individuals wanted observation. "Of course," Mercer answered after a brief pause. "As long as no one interferes." "We have no intention of interfering." The official stepped back without another question. The younger security officer quietly watched the exchange, growing increasingly uneasy. Whatever organization these visitors represented, they were remarkably comfortable waiting instead of taking control. That detail lingered in his mind. Inside the lobby, the receptionist reappeared from the secured hallway accompanied by a senior administrative director, whose arrival immediately changed the atmosphere among building employees. Staff members who had been whispering moments earlier now became noticeably quieter. The director carried a folder marked with several colored tabs and walked directly toward the executive employee. They spoke in voices too low for the crowd to hear. After reading the first page, the executive employee slowly looked through the glass toward the woman outside, then toward the sealed envelope resting beside her portfolio. His expression shifted from curiosity to unmistakable concern. Nearby, the maintenance supervisor quietly rolled his cart farther away, sensing that the entrance was becoming the center of something much larger than an ordinary security stop. Even the delivery driver remained seated inside his truck, watching through the windshield. Mercer glanced once more at the woman. If there is information that will resolve this, now would be the appropriate time. She met his eyes with the same composed expression she had worn since arriving. "Officer, the information has always been available. It simply has not reached the right people yet." Before Mercer could respond, one of the newly arrived officials received a phone call. He listened silently for several seconds, thanked the caller, closed the phone, and turned toward the building entrance. Then, for the first time since arriving, he addressed the woman directly. "Ma'am," he said with quiet respect, "they are ready for the envelope upstairs." The official's respectful words settled over the entrance like a sudden change in the weather. Several people instinctively looked toward the woman, expecting her to step forward immediately. She did not. Instead, she remained exactly where Officer Daniel Mercer had instructed her to stand. "Thank you," she replied quietly to the official. "I will proceed when the officer completes his process." Mercer studied her for a moment. That answer was not what he expected. If she truly had influential connections inside the building, she had every opportunity to bypass him. Instead, she was insisting that the interaction follow procedure. The thought unsettled him more than any raised voice could have. The senior administrative director stepped through the glass doors and stopped beside the executive employee. "Officer Mercer," he said respectfully, "there appears to be a scheduled delivery connected to an executive briefing." Mercer nodded once. "Then I need verification before granting access." "That is understandable," the director answered. "Verification is already being completed." Neither man challenged the other. Both understood that procedure mattered. The difference was that one believed the process had nearly reached its conclusion, while the other believed it had only just begun. The younger security officer quietly approached the reception desk and glanced toward one of the surveillance monitors. Camera 7 still showed the entire encounter. From the moment the woman had first arrived. Every instruction, every response, every pause, every witness. Nothing had been missed. He quietly informed the executive employee that all recordings were being automatically archived under the building's retention policy because of the restricted area designation. The executive employee gave a slow nod. Good. Leave everything exactly as it is. Outside, the second patrol officer looked toward Mercer. Would you like me to document witness names while we wait? Mercer considered the suggestion for only a second. Yes. Everyone who observed the interaction from the beginning. The woman listened without interruption. Her expression remained calm, almost appreciative that the record was becoming more complete instead of less. One of the government officials noticed her reaction. You seem relieved, he observed. She answered carefully. Accurate records protect everyone. The official gave a thoughtful nod but asked nothing more. A light breeze carried the sound of a church bell from several blocks away. The digital clock inside the lobby quietly changed to the next minute. Employees who had intended to begin their workday remained near the windows, unable to look away. Whatever meeting had been scheduled upstairs was clearly waiting, yet no one seemed willing to shortcut the process now unfolding outside the entrance. The receptionist emerged once again, this time carrying a printed visitor authorization sheet with multiple approval signatures already visible across the bottom. She handed it to the administrative director, who read it carefully before looking toward Mercer. Officer, he said, there is one final authorization pending. Mercer accepted that answer with a professional nod. Then we wait. The woman lowered her eyes briefly toward the sealed envelope before looking back at the building. That is the correct decision, she said softly. Almost at the same moment, the main entrance doors opened one final time, and an older man wearing the uniform of the department's chief stepped outside, his attention fixed immediately on the woman rather than anyone else. The chief crossed the last few feet without haste, his expression calm, attentive and unreadable. The conversation surrounding the entrance faded into complete silence as every employee, officer, and visitor watched him approach. Officer Daniel Mercer immediately straightened his posture and offered a respectful greeting. Chief. The older man returned the greeting with a slight nod but did not answer immediately. Instead, his attention rested on the woman standing quietly beside the leather portfolio. She met his eyes with the same composed professionalism she had shown since arriving. Neither of them smiled. Neither appeared surprised. It looked less like two strangers meeting than two professionals acknowledging the seriousness of a situation neither had expected. The chief spoke first. Good morning. Good morning, Chief, the woman replied. Mercer noticed the exchange but did not immediately draw conclusions. The chief knew hundreds of people throughout the department. Recognition alone did not change procedure. Officer Mercer, the chief said evenly, please bring me up to date. Mercer presented the facts exactly as he understood them. He explained that an unidentified visitor carrying sealed documents had requested entry into a restricted government building, declined to identify the receiving official directly, and refused to open the portfolio or break the delivery protocol. He described every decision in chronological order without exaggeration or apology. When he finished, the chief asked only one question. Has she complied with every lawful instruction you have given? Mercer answered honestly. Yes, Chief. She has remained cooperative throughout. The chief slowly nodded. He turned toward the woman. Have you attempted to bypass security? No, Chief. Have you requested special treatment? No, Chief. Have you challenged the officer's authority? No. The answers came without hesitation. Around them, several employees exchanged thoughtful looks. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. The woman had never argued. Mercer had never abandoned procedure. Yet the situation continued growing more significant. The chief looked toward the administrative director. Is the delivery still expected? Yes, Chief. Has the appointment been confirmed? Yes, Chief. Has the documentation been verified? The director hesitated for the first time all morning. Almost, sir. One final confirmation has just arrived. A government official stepped forward carrying a sealed identification packet that had remained unopened since his arrival. Chief, this was transmitted directly from executive administration less than 2 minutes ago. The chief accepted the packet without opening it immediately. Instead, he looked once more at the woman. Have you maintained custody of the original envelope since leaving your office this morning? Yes, Chief. Has anyone accessed its contents? No, Chief. The chief gave a slow nod of approval. Good. Mercer watched the exchange carefully. Every question centered on procedure, documentation, and chain of custody. No one had mentioned titles, ranks, or authority beyond what was necessary. The woman had never volunteered a single detail about herself. She had simply protected the process. The chief finally broke the official seal on the identification packet and removed the first document inside. As his eyes moved across the page, his expression changed almost imperceptibly. He looked back at the woman, then toward Officer Mercer, then quietly closed the folder again. Without raising his voice, he said, Officer Mercer, before anyone moves another step, there is something everyone here needs to understand. No one spoke. Even the traffic beyond the front gate seemed to disappear as the chief held the folder at his side without opening it again. He looked first at Officer Daniel Mercer, then at the woman, making certain both remained exactly where they were. Officer Mercer, he said in the same steady tone, I appreciate that you have documented this encounter from the beginning. Mercer answered immediately. Yes, Chief. My body camera has remained active, witness names are being collected, and the security recordings have been preserved. Good, the chief replied. Do not stop the recording. That instruction surprised several people standing nearby. Instead of ending the encounter the chief was making certain every remaining moment would also become part of the official record. The woman lowered her eyes briefly in acknowledgement but said nothing. The chief then addressed everyone gathered outside the entrance. Before anyone reaches a conclusion, I want everyone to understand that this situation will be evaluated exactly as every professional matter should be evaluated. We will rely on facts, documentation, and procedure. He turned back toward Mercer. Officer, throughout this interaction, did this visitor refuse to cooperate with lawful instructions? No, Chief. Did she attempt to enter the building after being instructed to stop? No, Chief. Did she threaten anyone? No, Chief. Did she interfere with your investigation? Mercer hesitated only long enough to think carefully before answering. No, Chief. Each response echoed across the silent entrance. Employees who had quietly assumed there must have been hidden resistance now realized the record reflected something entirely different. The chief slowly opened the folder again. This document confirms that today's scheduled delivery required uninterrupted chain of custody, restricted disclosure, and direct transfer to executive administration. He closed the folder once more before revealing any names. Those requirements explain every answer this visitor has given since arriving. Mercer listened carefully. His posture remained professional, but for the first time uncertainty appeared in his expression. The woman had never refused to cooperate. She had refused only to violate documented procedure. The distinction suddenly carried enormous weight. The younger security officer looked toward the sealed envelope again, finally understanding why she had protected it so carefully. One of the government officials quietly stepped beside the chief. Sir, executive administration has confirmed they are prepared to receive the delivery immediately after your authorization. Thank you, the chief replied. He then faced the woman once again. Have you maintained possession of every required document? Yes, Chief. Has anyone requested that you disregard protocol? No. Have you altered your responsibilities because of today's circumstances? No, Chief. My responsibility remains the same. The chief nodded with unmistakable approval. Around them, the crowd had stopped viewing the encounter as a confrontation. It had become something else entirely. A demonstration of how two professionals following different assumptions could create consequences neither intended. Mercer finally spoke. Chief, if additional verification is now complete, I am prepared to adjust my actions according to your direction. The chief looked directly at him for several quiet seconds before replying. "Officer, your next decision will matter just as much as your first one." Then he turned toward the assembled witnesses and said, "It is time for everyone here to learn who has been standing at this entrance all morning." The chief let the silence settle before he spoke again, ensuring every person gathered outside the entrance understood that what came next would become part of the official record. He stepped beside the woman instead of in front of her, careful not to turn the moment into a spectacle. "This morning," he said, "many of you have watched an encounter unfold from beginning to end. You have seen an officer perform his duty as he understood it. You have also seen a visitor remain patient, respectful, and fully cooperative despite significant inconvenience. Now you deserve the complete context." He opened the folder one final time and read from the first page. The individual standing here was assigned by executive administration to personally deliver confidential materials concerning a department-wide review of procedural accountability. Those materials required uninterrupted chain of custody and could not be opened, copied, or discussed before delivery. A quiet murmur moved through the crowd. The woman did not react. She neither nodded nor corrected the chief. She simply waited until he had finished speaking. "She followed every instruction required by her assignment," the chief continued. "She also followed every lawful instruction given by Officer Mercer. At no point did she resist, argue, or request special treatment." Mercer felt every sentence with increasing weight. None of the facts contradicted his report, yet together they revealed something he had failed to recognize. His judgment had been shaped too quickly, and once he believed his first conclusion, every later decision had reinforced it. He took one slow breath before speaking. "Chief, I understand now that my assessment was incomplete." The chief met his eyes. "Incomplete assessments can happen to experienced officers. What matters is whether we are willing to examine how they happen." Mercer nodded without offering excuses. "I welcome that review." The woman finally spoke. "Chief, if I may." "Of course." She looked toward Mercer rather than the crowd. "Officer, I appreciate that you documented everything and preserved the recordings. Accurate records protect everyone involved, including me, including you, and including this department." Several employees lowered their eyes, recognizing